A legacy of distrust has set the stage for the relationship between Iran and Israel, one of deep-rooted animosity and mistrust. Since the Islamic Revolution in 1979, relations have been marked by hostility and suspicion. Iran does not recognize Israel as a legitimate state, while Israel views Iran's nuclear program and support for militant groups like Hezbollah as existential threats. Both countries possess significant military capabilities. Israel has a technologically advanced military with a history of successful operations. Iran has a large military with a formidable ballistic missile arsenal and a network of proxy forces throughout the region. The two nations are engaged in a shadow war marked by cyber attacks, assassinations, and proxy conflicts. This simmering tension occasionally erupts into open confrontation, threatening to destabilize an already volatile region. The international community has long sought to mediate the conflict, but with limited success. The possibility of a full-scale war between Iran and Israel remains a constant threat, with potentially devastating consequences for the entire Middle East. Recent events have pushed the two countries closer to the brink. Alleged Israeli airstrikes on Iranian targets in Syria and the assassination of Iranian nuclear scientists have escalated tensions. Iran has responded with threats of retaliation and increased support for its regional proxies. Diplomatic efforts to ease the crisis are underway, but face significant obstacles. The United States, once a mediator, is now seen as taking sides, having withdrawn from the Iran nuclear deal and imposed crippling sanctions. International organizations like the United Nations are calling for restraint and dialogue. However, their influence is limited, and their pleas are often ignored in the heat of the moment. The situation remains highly volatile, with any miscalculation or provocation potentially sparking a wider conflict. The world watches with bated breath, hoping for a diplomatic solution, but fearing the worst.
Military strategists on both sides are dusting off their contingency plans. Israel is believed to be preparing for a possible preemptive strike against Iranian nuclear facilities, a move fraught with risk and uncertainty. Iran, in turn, is bolstering its defenses and readying its missile forces. Iranian commanders have threatened to target Israeli cities and military installations if attacked. A hypothetical war scenario would likely involve a multi-front conflict. Israel would aim to cripple Iran's nuclear program and weaken its military capabilities through a combination of airstrikes and cyber attacks. Iran would retaliate with ballistic missile attacks on Israeli territory, potentially drawing in its regional allies like Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza. The conflict could quickly escalate, drawing in regional and global powers.
Section 4. Cities under siege. The human cost of war. A war between Iran and Israel would be devastating for both sides, with civilian populations bearing the brunt of the suffering. Thousands, if not millions, of innocent lives would be at risk. Israeli cities would be vulnerable to relentless missile attacks. Bomb shelters would become temporary homes, and daily life would come to a standstill under the constant threat of bombardment. In Iran, civilian infrastructure would be targeted, disrupting essential services like electricity and water. The country's already struggling economy would crumble under the weight of war. The conflict would trigger a humanitarian crisis of immense proportions. Refugees would flee the fighting, overwhelming neighboring countries already struggling to cope with existing crises.
Section 5. A fragile peace, the long road to resolution. Even if a full-scale war is averted, the path to a lasting peace between Iran and Israel remains elusive. Deep-seated mistrust, ideological differences, and competing security concerns continue to fuel the animosity. The international community must remain actively engaged in seeking a diplomatic solution. This requires facilitating dialogue, rebuilding trust, and addressing the legitimate security concerns of both sides. A lasting peace will require difficult compromises and a willingness to move beyond past grievances. Both sides must recognize the futility of endless conflict and the potential benefits of peaceful coexistence. The stakes are incredibly high. Failure to find a peaceful resolution to the conflict would have catastrophic consequences for the region and the world. The time for diplomacy is now, before it's too late.